out there. You get me, and I hope other people get that as well and don't look at this as a disrespectful content. True crime has varying degrees of sensitivity, and these videos tend to touch on abuse, beatings, murder, assault, things of that nature. So if that makes you uncomfortable, I understand. No offense taken, and please exit the video now. If you're like myself and love true crime ASMR, I invite you to stay and to enjoy this video, so let's jump right into it. This is going to be the story of an Englishman by the name of Glen Rycroft. So Mr. Rycroft grew up in Manchester, England, he grew up near Manchester, England, in the streets of Salford. From what I've read at the time that he grew up there, that this area was kind of a tougher neighborhood, and he always had a plan for himself that he would escape this area one day and he would create a good life for himself, which is entirely respectable. He was fairly intelligent. He was a forward-thinking man and quite personable. And in most things I've read about him, that was probably his strongest quality. In general, people just liked Glen. He was a good guy. He got along with everybody. He was a chill guy to hang out with. And it was a personality trait that would end up serving him very well in his first job, which is a flight attendant for British Airways. However, as much as Glen liked this job, it was never going to provide the income he needed to really live the high life, the life that was a part of his dreams since he was a young boy trying to escape Salford. Glen wanted to drive a flashy car, make a lot of money. He wanted to travel the world as a first-class passenger, not tend to them in the air. And so, Mr. Rycroft came up with a scheme. In September of 2000, he started approaching friends and family about an investment opportunity. He had told them that British Airways had launched an investment vehicle called the British Airways Investment Bond. This was a capital guaranteed scheme that was projected to return somewhere between 20 to 23% in only 12 to 18 months' time. This scheme was only opened to British Airways employees, but Rycroft was prepared to do them all a big favor. He basically said that he would invest any funds under his own name for his friends, and then he would pay them back the proceeds once the investment reached its expiration. And with returns like these, a guarantee of capital, and the backing of one of the world's foremost corporations, it's not surprising that there were many takers. So, Mr. Rycroft's brother-in-law, Paul Shaw, put in £26,000. A business associate, Glanville Go, invested £10,000. His uncle, John Rollins, contributed £5,000. investors right off the bat. And there were other investors that actually even invested more. The mother of an old school friend gave £43,000, and her sister wrote a check for £55,000, which was her entire life savings. What these trusting investors did not realize was that they would never see that money again. The British Airways investment bond that Rycroft talked about didn't exist. It was entirely a scam. Their money was not being invested. It was being used to finance a lavish lifestyle for Glen Rycroft. He rented a luxury apartment, leased a top-of-the-line German sedan. He bought a small business, took holidays in Florida in the United States, and the Bahamas, Australia, and he even brought several friends with him. So Rycroft had landed exactly where he wanted to be, and he achieved his goals of this lavish lifestyle only a few years into working as a flight attendant. However, clearly it was not from his own hard work. It was from taking horrific advantage of people that trusted him. Now, with all of this going on, he never considered an exit strategy. Like, there would come a time where this would end. There would come a time where these investors' families and friends would come looking for their money. They would come looking for their profit. But he never thought, oh my God, how am I going to handle when that moment comes? So we know his lies would not hold up forever. And sooner or later, people would come looking for their money. With no good way to make good on those promises, he would be exposed as a fraud, and he would likely be arrested and very well could end up in prison for these actions. And at the very, very least, best case scenario, he would just have humiliated himself in front of friends and family. And so, what does a scammer do? He comes up with another scam. And this one would discourage anyone from pressing him for money. In November of 2000, he asked for a period of unpaid leave from British Airways, saying that his mother had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. And this would set the stage for his next scam. So, in getting this leave from work, he then turns around and tells his friends and family a different story. He claims to them that he himself has been diagnosed with a very aggressive cancerous tumor, and that it had been found in his brain. And so he went on an extended sick leave from British Airways because he was not expected to survive and had less than 12 months to live. Rycroft played this horribly callous falsehood. He did everything he could think of to make this real for people. He typed up a letter on stolen stationery from a local hospital, supposedly confirming this diagnosis that he had. He shaved off his hair to emulate diagnosis. Now, when his investors asked for their money back, Rycroft could just shame them for being insensitive and claim that the stress they were putting on him was just worsening his condition. However, his last scam wasn't just employed passively to ward off these angry investors. He used this scam to raise new funds by claiming that he had to travel to Australia to undergo expensive medical treatment that was only available in that country. Even the people that he had already stolen this money from, that were already struggling financially because of this, were taken in by his sob story. Family and friends rallied together to raise an additional £20,000 for his fake treatment. But he did not stop there. He decided to cast the net wider. Rycroft began organizing fundraising events, set up collections at local clubs. He ran various raffles which offered flight tickets supposedly donated by British Airways as a prize. Now, from the research, it's not quite conclusive just how much money he raised in this time. However, it's clear that it was enough to finance yet another round of elaborate vacations. Those favorite locations that he had visited, like the Bahamas and Florida, he revisited, and he spent time at a 5-star golfing resort in Portugal as well, despite the fact that he didn't even play golf. He then decided with those funds that he would tour the United States before traveling to Australia with 2 friends in tow. These 2 individuals that he would be taking with him really were just 2 more victims in his elaborate schemes. They believed that they were going with their friend to Australia to be supportive during his life-threatening illness, but in truth, they were just being shifted around like pawns in a game. Rycroft would leave them alone for like a couple days at a time, saying that he had to go to some secret location for treatment, and then he would return looking weak and frail, just to soak up the sympathy that they poured onto him. All of this somehow was satisfying to Rycroft, and perhaps it was even more satisfying in ways than the money that he was getting, because it sounds like and seems like he really was seeking attention. But as is to be expected, this game that he was playing was about to unravel, and it would do so in a classic way of poetic justice. Rycroft had played his con too well. Because of this amazing performance he put on as a terminal cancer sufferer, his local community ends up rallying behind him, taking up the cause of the fundraiser. In October of 2001, a benefit concert was organized by his supporters, with various performers donating their services, and all of the profits would go towards Rycroft's cancer treatment. The con that Rycroft had so carefully constructed attention that he didn't want. So the woman overseeing all of the fundraising was a woman by the name of Debbie Henley, who coincidentally worked for British Airways. After hearing that the airline had previously donated free flights as prizes for Rycroft's raffle, Debbie suggested that they get the company involved in the charity evening. However, Rycroft was adamant that he did not want British Airways involved at all, and even insisted that this woman step down as the person coordinating this event. This became a little suspicious for her because in her mind, she is trying to maximize profits to help this man get funding for treatment. So why all the hostility, right? Well, the answer to that question would soon be forthcoming, as I think a lot of people would. I know I certainly would if I were in her shoes. She decided to dig deeper into what was going on, and she began to uncover several inconsistencies in his cancer story. The most jarring was something that Rycroft had shared with a number of people. He had told them that his former company had a jet permanently on standby, ready to fly him anywhere in the world should there be a breakthrough in the treatment for this disease. And to Debbie, this sounded highly unlikely. So she decided to ask about this at British Airways the following day. It was in that moment when she asked that question to British Airways that the extent of Rycroft's lies began to be exposed. So of course, that ludicrous lie about having a jet on standby it came out that that was false, okay? But Debbie also found out that he had resigned from the company a few months earlier, something he'd been desperately trying to hide from the local community. Then Debbie learns of the fictitious investment scheme that he had been running and knew that it was time to report this to the authorities. They decided to move forward with this charity event that they had planned, but all of the money that they raised would be donated to a local children's hospital instead. Now, as for Mr. Rycroft, he would spend the evening in police custody. He would ultimately be convicted on 25 charges of obtaining money by deception. His various schemes had earned him an estimated £200,000, which was money that would never be recovered. He would pay for this with a 4-year prison sentence, although he was released from prison after serving just 2 years. So by 2007, Rycroft was a free man looking for a new score. He clearly did not learn his lesson. So a gay man, he started trawling the hookup site FitLads, looking for someone to hook up with. And that was how Rycroft met 29-year-old Gareth MacDonald, a married questioned his sexuality, and after hooking up with Rycroft, he ends up abandoning his wife and children to set up a home with his newfound lover in North Wales. And it's uncertain if MacDonald knew of Rycroft's past, and if he did, Rycroft must have convinced him that he'd been, judged unfairly, or, clearly this guy was a master manipulator, so I don't think it would be too hard for him to come up with a lie, a tale, to explain away his past. And so MacDonald ends up pouring money into a travel company, which the two men start together. And this is fairly predictable, but here we go. Their travel business, the bills went unpaid, and MacDonald soon realized that money was just being siphoned out of the business and out of his own personal bank account. This resulted in an angry confrontation between the men, at which time MacDonald accused Rycroft of being a con artist. And over the days that followed, several text messages were exchanged between these lovers, with MacDonald telling Rycroft that he still loved him, but wasn't sure if he could trust him anymore. Understandably so. Rycroft responded that he hoped to win back that trust, beginning with righting a previous wrong. Now his uncle, John Rowlands, who was one of the previous investors, was visiting the UK from Canada, and Rycroft wanted to pay back the £5,000 he had taken from him in the British Airways investment scam, and that would require a trip to London. So MacDonald ends up saying yes to going on this trip to London with Rycroft. And so the couple sets off on their journey on September the 14th of 2007. However, Rycroft took a number of wrong turns along the route, and they ended up hopelessly lost and having to stay overnight in a travel lodge near Heathrow Airport. And in the early hours of the morning, Rycroft left the hotel, driving away in his car, and he was back within minutes, returning to their hotel room. Just moments later, he came running in to reception, shouting that his friend had been attacked, and saying that his friend had been attacked would be a significant understatement. Gareth MacDonald had not just been attacked. He had been murdered, struck so hard on the head with a fire extinguisher that 2 semi-circular fractures were left embedded in his skull. Now, of course, the police get involved and they question Rycroft, and he initially said that he had left the room to go buy a glucose monitor for his partner MacDonald, who was diabetic. And when he returned, he found MacDonald just beaten to death. Later, he would offer another story in this second story those stories worked well for him, and none of those came up with any evidence to support the claim. Staff at the travel lodge testified that he had been out of the room, but only just for a couple of minutes, and that was at odds with the timeline of his version of events. And then there was the murder weapon, which was covered in fingerprints. Rycroft claimed that this was because he had picked up the fire extinguisher earlier that evening. So of course his fingerprints are on it. That doesn't mean he killed the guy. But even if that were true, how could they explain the blood splatter on his shoes and pants? But despite the evidence not working in his favor, he continues to protest his innocence. Yet, Rycroft was arrested on suspicion of murder. Over the days that followed, the police would strengthen their case. Now, to police, this murder did not appear as a spur-of-the-moment thing. They felt that this was premeditated, and that Rycroft had been thinking about this for quite some time. They end up investigating his internet search history and find terms like how to kill someone by injection, how to break a neck, effect of a blow to the head, and fall down stair kills. So clearly this guy was looking up ways to kill his partner. There was also a manuscript that police end up finding in addition to the first few chapters of an autobiography that Rycroft was writing. Now, while this did not necessarily provide any evidence that was directly incriminating, it did offer insight into Rycroft's state of mind at this time. In this autobiography, he likened himself to Tom Ripley, which was the character played by Matt Damon in the movie The Talented Mr. Ripley, who is a young man from a modest background who seeks to improve his lot in life through deception and murder, which is eerily and strikingly similar to the path that Rycroft took. Now, this is a good thing. Rycroft is ultimately convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 25 years. And when I was researching this, there was this joke that the inmates that he shared a cell block with had better keep an eye on their commissary money and not be fooled by this master manipulator. So that concludes the case of Glen Rycroft. There's something about this case that was so appealing for me to cover, and I'm choosing to leave this to the end of the video. And I'm not going to go into it in full detail, but there was somebody in my life that, when I was researching this case, came to mind in the sense that they very much reminded me of Mr. Rycroft. Not in the sense of taking money from people, but of, I'm gonna say potentially, even though I believe this deeply to be true, faked a cancer diagnosis, and of all cancers to fake, chose one that is the most aggressive form cancer and took to social media to garner this support and attention, and really fed off of that attention when it was something that this person historically didn't receive from people. And so I was just like nose deep in this case because I felt like I was reading a case about somebody that I knew in a way, if that makes any sense. So let me know what you thought about this case. I felt like this could, well, I was gonna say, I felt like this one could be made into a movie, but there is already a movie like this, and the lead character is played by Matt Damon, which I mentioned, so I'm gonna have to check out that movie and see how similar the talented Mr. Ripley is to the talented Mr. Rycroft. Thank you for joining me for yet another true crime video, and until